Κυρία Τασούρη, θα ήθελα να ευχαριστήσω σε εσάς και σε όλους για τη δυνατότητα να είμαι εδώ στην Ελλάδα και να μιλάω. Αλλά θα κάνω την ομιλία μου στα αγγλικά, αν με επιτρέπετε. I'll be very brief. I just want to have a few remarks about the big picture in Europe and then maybe work out some implications about this region here in Southeast Europe, which of course was the subject of my book on Russian influence. Now, there are two ways to look at energy security from a conceptual perspective. One is to have a top-down view, emphasizing states and power and geopolitics. In other words, how energy is an instrument for governments to assert national interest. And that's very prevalent in the popular coverage of energy issues. Certainly you see it now in the Eastern Mediterranean with Turkey, Cyprus and Greece coming to confrontation. But I think it's a more productive way to explore energy is to have a bottom-up view. In other words, ask questions about how market shifts, changing patterns of consumption and demand, but also technological change, and why not normative change affects the processes and how governments, but also regulators, separate from the executive, adapt to those changes. And then, of course, when it comes to technological change, you consider the impact of new means of generating, but also transmitting and consuming energy. The renewable boom is certainly one such area. The decreasing cost of solar energy batteries has been a game changer in Europe, but also globally. And we are not far from the moment when we will have the means to conserve energy, which will kind of speed up the transition away from economy based on fossil fuels. Also, carbon capture is one area that is likely to be on the rise. Patterns of and technological means to distribute energy might mean more flexible networks, less centralized, capable of kind of resisting shocks and disruptions, which will have tremendous implications for the way we consider energy security. And finally, normative change, what societies value when it comes to energy, how they structure their preferences. In the post-industrial world in Western Europe, but also in parts of the US, and this is a big debate in the US, renewable energy has become a key issue in connection to climate change, but also it has affected consumption preferences for significant parts of the population. And now you see the US at the official level withdrawing from the Paris Agreement, although it's clear that it will take time. And then you have states, but also cities, remaining committed to the goal of reducing emissions, which has to do again with normative change and expectations by groups of citizens or parts of society. So this is all important. Now, if we look at Europe, the crisis, economic crisis, has been an important development because it has led to a reduction, a decrease of consumption. Europe's energy consumption was on the rise until 2006, and then it registered decline, and only now with the return of growth in the Eurozone, you have marginal increased uptick in energy consumption. But it's clear that the overall goal is to conserve energy and to limit energy intensity. Of course, it's different across different parts of Europe. In the East, you see much lower levels. The challenge is much more formidable. Again, technology, this is an area where we have, and we will have more and more important developments. Regulatory change, the external shocks of the two gas crises in 2006 and 2009 have provided a big push for European regulators to speed up the process of marketizing the energy sector, certainly in electricity, but also increasingly in gas with the third energy package. Of course, it's an uneven process, it will take time, but the EU is a slow-moving, it's like a big ship, it's very difficult to steer, but once it gets on a certain trajectory, it's very difficult to stop it, and I understand that John will be speaking about the new energy crisis, new gas crisis that we have seen over the last couple of days. So, of course, gas is very political. Let's move the discussion and focus it on this important side of the energy security balance, not least because it's a commodity traded not just between companies, but traditionally underwritten by states, by governments, traded on the basis of long-term contracts. Definitely kind of underscored how Turkey plays into that. But increasingly we'll see the gas sector change because more and more it will be resembling the oil sector. More flexible arrangements, LNG coming on stream, of course, away from the oil indexations, and more flexibility when it comes to access to the market by various competitors. It's easier said than done. It's progressing much better in the West than in Central and Eastern Europe, but the trend is there. And finally, a few words about Southeast Europe, and I'll conclude, because I understand that we have scarcity of resources here. So I think the region is more and more enveloped in this overall European Union cooperation framework. Even non-member states in the Western Balkans are included into the energy community, and the legislation aimed to make the market more liberalized is kicking in. But there are a lot of obstacles to do with lack of good infrastructure, also social and political considerations, and frankly corruption and state capture. So the process will take much slower than it was expected originally. We haven't seen that much of move and opening competition across the region, but I believe nonetheless that we are getting there. I finally, when it comes to Russia, I think the fear of dependency on Russia is slightly exaggerated, because if you look at Southeast Europe, apart from Turkey, which is a different case, the absolute volumes of gas consumed is not that high. We're talking about relatively small volumes that are replaceable by other means in times of crisis. In fact, gas is very expensive, and one of the benefits of diversification is bringing down the cost, making natural gas available to households, not just to the industry. And hopefully there'll be more gas flowing in the region, which will benefit consumers, moving away from this concern about who gains what and what it means in geopolitics, but looking from the perspective of end users. So let me stop here, because I've been talking for way too long, and thank you so much for your patience.